So we're here today for another great interview coming up. I'm excited because I follow this person on Twitter and Sarah does as well. He posts a lot of great content for adoptees. And I'm going to introduce Rudy Owens from Portland, Oregon is joining us. Welcome.
Oh, good morning. Nice to see you, Louise.
Morning.
Nice to see you, Sarah. It's really
Nice
good
to
we
see
could
you.
connect. Yeah.
Yes.
It is nice to connect. So we're kind of just dig in, give us your adoptee story and also what you're
Story.
doing. Mm-hmm.
Well, my adoptee story is perhaps not that different than anyone else's who came from the era. I mean, I am of the era post-World War II baby, adoption boom era. And lots of people like to say baby scoop era, but I always think that hides actually what was going on, which was family relinquishment and family separation and very, very hard decisions that were forced upon vulnerable single mothers to surrender their child into the U.S. adoption system.
Thank you for putting it that way. Family separation and
Yeah.
family. I like that.
It is family.
That's calling it what it really is.
Flag shirt today intentionally because my family, my biological kin and their ancestry is from Finland, and that's very important to me as I get older. And I look like those people. Surprise, surprise. So I was part of that wave, and the best data we have, and I really like to focus on data as a way to tell the stories because facts are things you can put your hands on, and they are real and they are provable and they are not subject to sort of bending because we can verify them. But there was over 2.7 million infants that were separated in the post-World War II years. And those are the years where there's the greatest, use of a coercive system that literally, pulled families apart. And it was all based on a general consensus by everyone who had a stake in this. It was the medical profession, social work profession, religious institutions, legal systems, political systems, et cetera. And I was born in a hospital. It's called Crittenton General Hospital. And as far as I know from all the research that I have been able to piece together, it was the second largest maternity hospital in the United States dedicated to adoption and family separation. The largest was Willows, the maternity home in Kansas City, which is the epicenter.
Yeah. And I did not know that.
And there's been some very good historiography on Willows, and it served as a central hub because all these women could get there rather easily, and then and the infants could be dispersed out, and that ran as both a maternity home and a hospital. Crittenton General Hospital was multiple facilities. The last one that I was born in had 3 wings. 2 of them were dedicated to caring for those women and their infants when they were born. Another wing provided infant care to just general population members. I know this because those people have contacted me via my webpage. And it served lower income women. It was also a training hospital for medical professionals. So OB-GYN.
Where was Crittenton?
It was in the city of Detroit.
Okay.
I was in Detroit.
I'm a proud Motown, Detroit city native. I never shy away from that fact. And they say, where are you from? I say Detroit. And then in their minds, they think the suburbs. I go, no, Detroit. And so it is my hometown, and I take great pride in my birth city, and feel its pain and agony too these days. And so then I was farmed out, literally like all these other infants. So no data has been provided that is available, that has been made public by the state of Michigan. And I've asked repeatedly for it. I put in records requests, et cetera, and they still claim that there are no records. And then we get back to this larger issue of the flood ate the records.
Oh, there's always a flood.
The fire.
How many floods and fires in the adoption industry?
Correct.
There's so many floods.
And so I've done this massive circular chase, going to the public library, going to a historical society, going to the state, and going to another group. And mysteriously, these records have vanished. Now, by state law, records should then be in the custody of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. It's MDHHS. And they are notoriously lousy at being responsive and open in terms of anything related to adoption and records. So I pieced this together. So my guesstimate is anywhere from 12 to 15,000 plus infants, probably more, were separated and born at that facility. My mother was just one of many who was a young woman at the time. She was older than most. She was 24.
Between what years are you guessing that?
I was born in 1965.
So but I mean, what you're saying, like 12 to 15,000.
Oh, so it was formally opened in 1933. And then it formally shut down in 1974, and its life cycle tracked exactly what was going on nationally with the greater acceptance of women as being single mothers caring for their children, the change in sexual mores in the country that did not look upon out of marriage everything as a lifelong shame burden for a mother. And basically the product and the market was drying up for adoption. That's what the blunt data say, is that more women were keeping their children, less kids were up for adoption, and the need for a facility like Crittenton, which at the time was this big hospital, waned. And they built a secondary facility out in the county, and it was called in Rochester, and that's the city outside of Detroit, and that's the new Crittenton, and then it got bought out again by another system. But so that's what happened. So the hospital followed what was going on nationally, and I was part of that. And I was born there, and I was placed with a foster family for 5 weeks, and then I was placed with my adoptive family through a Lutheran social service agency, and lived in Detroit. So that's how I
too was Lutheran services, and I too was 1965.
Yeah. I think
that's the same.
I think I've actually researched your facility in St. Louis, Sarah, right? You're a St. Louis.
I was born in St. Louis at Barnes Hospital, and then Lutheran Children's Services. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. And then, by the way, in St. Louis I grew up in St. Louis. I love St. Louis too. And then if you go to visit Barnes, it's this massive medical complex, and there's this old hospital, and it's the maternity hospital.
Yes.
It's this massive hospital located in the heart of the city. And this is like other cities. And I am sure that hospital was involved in, the providing adoption services for mothers and expecting parents who wanted a child. I doubt they're going to publicly ever share that, but it's inevitable they were.
Agreed.
So that's the story. I mean, so I'm part of that. I think that the main difference is I was part of this big facility, and no one knows
business,
and no one's talking about it. The building that was torn down in 1975. No one has a collective memory of it in that city. I've tried to get stories published about it in existing Detroit news publications that still are clinging on to survival there, the print media. And it's just not a story that really resonates now, because there's so many other things that are more important to people's lives there than just what happened 50 plus years ago.
How did you come to find out about your biological mom and all of that?
Well, that was sort of like what I did when I became an adult. But, I've always known I was adopted. I had no physical resemblance to my adoptive parents, so it was entirely obvious to me I was not related to them. I think my assumption was that they probably just decided to tell me. I never had a sit down conversation with them, like, let's talk about this. I just knew. And my sister, I looked nothing like my sister.
Was she also adopted, or was she?
She's adopted. So she was born in Saginaw, Michigan. So she's also impacted by the closed record laws that have kept our families hidden from each other and knowing each other. And she has a darker complexion, brown hair. At the time, she was a little heavier set than me, and then that turned into other more serious health complications as she grew older. And I was always this sort of skinny kid, and I was a late bloomer. So we had there was nothing at all that made anyone would say we looked anything remotely alike. And my adoptive father was 6'3" and a large Germanic looking guy. And my mother was sort of petite and sort of looked like a madman woman from that era, always perfectly dressed, stylish. Everything. She had fashion sensibility. She came from New Jersey, so fashion was important regardless of who you were. And so she always carried that with her throughout her life. And so I think they just decided to tell me. And so I went off to college. Childhood was a mess, sort of. And I just decided this is what I needed to do. And I started, my first efforts to find my records when I was in college, and the first communication I did with the state was a lie. Said, we don't have your records, and they just
dead
blew
end.
you off.
Yeah.
They flat out said, we do not have any records for you.
Yeah, they indicated that they could not provide that service to me. And so what they would do in the 80s was they would say, we don't have it, you need to contact your adoption agency. You contact your adoption agency, they say you have to contact the state. And so you would get into this loop where it was a cycle of dishonesty. And one thing I've said in previous conversations I've had with people who have confronted adoption is you have to be able to accept that people are going to lie to you all the time. It is just an inherent part of the system. It's baked into everything about what adoption is, whether it's international, intercountry adoption, US adoption, whatever. There is denials of truths and a promotion of a lie that are essential in how it operates. And the way it operates just at the person-to-person level, bureaucrat to subservient, demanding person denied their vital records is one of power, and they wield that power by lying to you.
So nefarious.
That is a provable fact. That I have documents, so it's not like I'm making this up. I've got all of my letters that I collected. I, like probably many people, my stack is this wide of papers, of my adoption trail. And my computer files are now in the thousands. So I used all those lies and dishonesty as part of creating my story in my book. And so it was that process of beginning it. And then, like many of us, the law provided us breadcrumbs, which was our non-identifying information, a 2-page summary that you could then try to piece together a story about who your kin were. And some of that information was just flat out wrong. It was either a fabrication of a social worker who typed up the documentation that they did, or it was that the person who was telling that story, maybe it was the biological mother, was not providing information accurately, or she didn't know. She, like in my case, my biological mother, and if we get into terms, I use biological mom or bio mom. Some people don't like that. I use that in my book, and I believe it's acceptable. I just want to get that out of the way.
I don't know what is the controversy about that?
It's a whole thing. It came up last night in the thing I was listening to as well. Yeah,
it matters for a lot of people. I address it in my conversations and in my book, and that's one of the first things I do is what language I'm going to use and how I'm going to use language. So for me, I say I use the word bastard intentionally.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter yesterday. I was laughing.
And I do say biological mom, and I'm sorry to those who may be offended, but that is my preferred term.
Can somebody enlighten me about what's offensive about it? I guess I'm
Louise. You say you.
Well, last night I was listening to it last night on a happy hour that took place, and it's the first mother likes to be first mother. I think they're trying to honor the first mother, okay. And then, but then there was a mother on there who said, "I'm not offended by that. I am the biological mom." It's just I think it's just one of these the terms now that get us in trouble that we have to be careful of. But it's kind of shifting every day. I'm not sure. I say it too. I actually say bio mom too.
Yeah, I do too. That's always what I've said.
I also found a lot of people who were mothers who made those hard decisions back then who used that term. So my sense is if there's a sizable portion of people who use that in their voice, I believe it's entirely okay. And I also have a little bit of say in this too, because this was a person who made a decision which impacted me, and I sort of get to control a bit of a narrative as well about defining
an adoptee.
who the people are. So anyway, so it's from that, and like her information about my my biological father side, and I'll use biological father too, was just wrong. Describing what she was using, just information based on a photograph, like just trying to describe his parents, and they were described as short and heavy set, and then I found them who they were later, and they weren't. They were just sort of skinny, Midwesterners and shorter. And so maybe they looked like, and like I even found a photo of my biological paternal grandfather on my father's side, and he's from the Midwest state. And I compared him to me and sent it to a friend of mine. And she said, you both look the same. You both look lean. That's how she just said, we just look the same. And I, right, just on my refrigerator over there, I've got a photograph of him just because I'm the smack resemblance of him.
Yeah.
My ears, if it's at this angle, it's his graduation photo. He was a veterinarian. And my ear is like his ear. It's like you could carbon copy it. So anyway, so that information was wrong, but from that I was able to get some information, long story, and I was able to find out the name of what they would do is they would white out lines on your 2-pager. And because it happened to be in the middle of a sentence, I could count the typewritten characters. It was a 4-character name of a high school, and there's only one high school in Detroit that was 4 characters long. And then I was
That's
able
pretty
to
good. That's a good investigation.
That only took 2 years to get to that point when every other need failed. And then I flew out to Detroit in April of, right around this time, actually, right before my 24th birthday. I flew out mid-April to Detroit, went to the Detroit Public Library right after I arrived at the airport, got a copy of the yearbook, which they had remarkably, and then began looking through the yearbook because my mother had a twin brother. So all I had to do was find information on twins, and there they were.
That's how you found her. That's pretty great.
And it's like, oh yeah, that's them.
I want to note something, because in the couple of years that we've been doing this, very few people have searched out that early on and had that thing in them. What do you attribute? I mean, you kind of said in passing you had a bad childhood or chaotic or whatever it was.
I mean, so I'm blunt in my book about what happened when I was a child. My father was a minister, was not very happy as a minister, probably should have never been a minister, came from a very domineering family. And he had to drink, he was an alcoholic, and he was abusive, and he was very harmful to my mother. So it was a domestic abuse situation that went on for a long time. And I tried to piece that together in telling the story because it was a dark family secret, because no one likes to talk about alcoholism. No one likes to talk about women who have been abused, try to move on. And and my mom was just, she had this ability to just forget. Like that happened that time in my life. I'm in my new chapter and everything has changed. And she ended up dying of Alzheimer's. And that was a very hard journey for her. And she passed away in 2020. And she had married a man later, but she always said, even as her Alzheimer's was eating away her brain, that she always believed that it was because of the time she was hit in the head. And there's actual evidence about that. She was told that. And there is traumatic brain injury association with the development of Alzheimer's in many people. And she repeatedly suffered trauma. And so that informs everything about my world too. And I'm very, I sort of became an advocate for single moms de facto. And I champion whatever story they're dealing with in life. Anyway, so it was because of that they separated when I was in second grade, third grade. And so, it's like, okay, well, this wasn't working out. Then I would visit my father, and my father, because of his drinking problem, would always be battling his addiction. And it's a terrible thing, alcoholism, and it will kill you, and it destroys your lives and destroys the lives of people around you. And I really have a lot of both empathy for those with alcoholism, and then low tolerance for things that they do to other people too, as well, because of my own personal experience. And, many times when he was in his worst state, which was being just shit-faced drunk, he would be driving me and my sister. And so, I mean, luckily, the fates intervened and we didn't die. That's all I can say. And I say that, I think, first paragraph of my book, right at the stop. So like, I'm really honest about that, but that's not my story. My story is my life after I decided to do things, and that is what I want to focus on. I'm honest about that. So for me, it was just natural, like, well, obviously these folks really weren't invested in this institution that failed, which was a two child husband and wife family in suburbia. It blew up. It was a disaster for them. And so I sort of then was going to do my own thing. And part of the thing I thought I needed to do was just to really get into this project and be independent from my family, because family was not a place that was really welcoming to me. So I was going to chart my own life and figure out my own path. And that because I was raised Christian, Moses was a part of my life. I heard the Moses story and the Bible, and like, oh, that's my story. That's me. And look who he became. He became the superhero, right? Celebrated by 3 faiths around the world as a prophet, and he's a hero. Like, I can associate with that. That guy's, he discovers who he is. He goes on this journey, and he rejects his family, and he chooses his path. I really associate. And the other was King Arthur. And I read mythology. I read Lemort the Arthur, and I was into fantasy. I mean, I wasn't into MAGA. MAGA wasn't really around, so I was into what was there, which was the earlier stories. And I saw the adoptee myth, right, just glaring. It was so obvious to me, and I was like, I knew that was going to be a part of my journey. I was going to go on that journey. I mean, it sounds so trite that you're going to take the hero's journey. I mean, I know people who hate that. They can't.
It doesn't sound trite. I don't think it sounds trite.
Joseph Campbell, I know that the concept of the journey is not one welcomed by everybody, but for me, it really fits. Everything about the hero myth and the hero's journey fit for me. And part of the hero's journey is reunion with mother. It's part of this sort of, and then part of it is, you jump into the void, you have your challenges, you have your failures, you find your mentors, and then you come back. And then as you come back a different person, but with that knowledge, then they're using that information to then do good, hopefully, and help. And so I always saw like that journey was completed, and then I had to do something with it at the end. And that was eventually tell the story. But unfortunately for me, I had to wait until my mother passed away because of my unusual family dynamics with my sister, who has had a lot of problems, my adoptive sister. I had to always sort of not have anything go wrong. I needed to be the one who had his act together to provide stability and support my mom. And I chose to do that. And I did it. And then when her brain started falling apart in a terrible way with Alzheimer's in its own horrific way, I decided, because I knew she'd never read anything I wrote, I could now then tell the story. So I just knew I was going to do it, and I did it, and life went on, and I still started, visiting my family all the time. Just had to go 2 places now. One was in Michigan, one was in St. Louis. Separate, very separate from both of them. And
so you are in relations with your biological mom?
Yeah, and unfortunately now I don't talk about it, but I will in this sense. She's right now, she'll be in her early 80s, and she's now facing end of life things, cognitive and other health. I mean, she's in an era where she's faced with these challenges. So that is going on as well with her. So we're in touch, but it has always been, it's imperfect. I try not to talk about it. I don't talk about it on Twitter. I really don't talk about it that much in my book, because I'm much more interested in trying to fix laws than I am about going back to that story. But this situation creates dynamics where, what do you do? I'm now in this age, and this is informing some of my advocacy now, and I don't know about you all, but I just know that there are other people in the state of Michigan who are like me, whose birth parents have either died or dying. There are people my age who are now dying, and the state doesn't care. And there's an entire generation, because of closed records in Michigan, which is a donut hole state. That's how it means if you were born in those post 35 years after World War II, you had the hardest obstacles to get your records. So there's an entire generation that literally you know, to be honest, like
Yeah.
where my mother is dying or are dead, or are in my age, and people like my age could be dying or dead already who will never know. And that's really hard for me to accept. And I've decided this year that my advocacy was going to just call out Governor Whitmer and
Yeah.
her administration and just say, you know, unless you do something, you know, these deaths are on your watch of people never knowing. People may think that's harsh, but to be honest, I think where we're at right now is they literally, those who are in office want this generation to just die out, not knowing who they are. They do not
be quiet.
And in California, what happened this week, as some of us may have been watching, with a very bad piece of legislation for a very secretive state where there
I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it until I read your Twitter.
And a state where all of those, many of those infants that were stolen by the TAM adoption black market ring in Tennessee were sent to Hollywood and California. And so they have a lot of dirty secrets they're trying to hide too. And then to see these lawmakers in this room completely indifferent that an entire generation of people are just literally passing away, not knowing who they are, and have no inkling of a concern about it, it really frustrates me. This is how I'm going to put it mildly.
No, I'm with you. And it seems to be the one, adoption seems to be a universally thought of good thing. Across all political parties. It's just,
well, I'm going to jump right into current affairs. So for those who don't know this, do you mind if I do that?
Please do.
Oh, okay. So in California, a Republican lawmaker, his name is Tom Lackey. He represents a conservative district in the southern part of the state, an adoptive parent of two, promoted legislation that would bring in some of the worst aspects of bad bills that have been introduced in other states. And the adoptee rights coalitions around the country rallied to try and get this thing quashed. And it was a committee where there were 8 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And the final vote of this committee to pass out was 8 yays, 3 abstentions, no nos. Not a single Democrat in that committee voted no. And even after some really great messaging and facts were shared by groups like Adoptees United and Bastard Nation and Cal Open, which is a group based in California, it made no difference whatsoever, apparently, on how they approached the legislative kabuki, which is these testimonies, which is kabuki. If you don't know legislative arenas, you see them and they do their, it's very formalized and ritualized, and you defer to the chair, you speak politely, you acknowledge with empathy the heartfelt feelings and testimony of that person who was testifying, who was actually an industry lobbyist supporting Tom Lackey. And it was just this great spectacle of nonsense. And no one basically said, isn't it a right of everyone to know who they are and where they come from?
Yeah, no one stepped up. Not one person.
No one stepped up. And that, to me, that made me come up with my little video yesterday, which I rarely do, which is the saying that, no friends but the mountains. That's what adoptees have. We don't have friends when we need those friends to help us. So part of that is us supporting others, is what we sort of do instinctively. But then when we have to step in, we have to be more resourceful, more creative, more resilient, more loud, more angry to get heard, because they're ignoring you. And then it creates all these stereotypes. But a great lesson is that, we don't fall into the bipartisan spectrum neatly, because adoption is a bipartisanly supported issue.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking a lot. Sorry about that.
No, that's so important.
This is your episode.
And thank you for your advocacy, and also with single mothers.
Yes.
Like that you're the guy doing that.
I don't know, when you've got a mom who's raising 2 kids and struggling and has a crappy job and bad managers, and you hear it every day, you can really empathize with them. That's all I can say. It's just like, wow, that's not very good. And with my mom's case, she didn't get any support from anybody. And, you know, to be honest, I actually, after I did my research on my book, I realized we didn't get support partially because we're not the kin. We're not biologically related to those families. And like it or not, I go into this in my book, biologically, we are programmed to help our kin relations succeed in the next generation. That is true in mammalian species, bug species, you know, smaller species. The investment in the survival of your genetic relationship is an imperative of life. And this is manifest in how we treat each other in kin relationships as well. And it's very true that, you know, I mean, the research is all in stepfamily relationships. The greatest abuse, you know, a child entering a stepchild in a stepfather relationship is at much a higher elevated risk of harm than a biological child. That is documented around the world, cross-culturally, across time. And it is identified in many countries as a known risk that the authorities have to be mindful of in caring for the well-being of children in those situations. It's not saying stepfathers are evil, whatever, but it's saying is that they're not biologically related, and there's an imperative not to care for that child because they're just not invested in that child to succeed as that. And so we've heard so many stories about families where you have a biological sibling and an adoptive sibling and a disparity in treatment and care and finance.
Yeah,
and
we've had
resources.
some of those, yes.
Yep, and there's even research that shows that, like, I think it was a South Korean study where the stepchildren got less calories. They weren't even fed the same food. I mean, this research is really well documented. No one wants to take on adoption because that would be taboo, because then you would expose the harmful truths of what it means to be not biologically related.
Yeah. I'm an adopted stepchild.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have 3 stepsisters and a stepfather, and I can tell you that there is no feelings of warmth and brotherly and sisterly bonds between us. It was because we're older, but we can't force a relationship that doesn't exist biologically upon each other, and then we have to, and it creates tensions and problems. And I didn't like it, and then as I got older, I just sort of moved on, and I just sort of acknowledged it. And then as I started writing my book, I then sort of confronted it in a way where I said, okay, now because that's the situation, what am I going to do about it in a way that makes sense? And so in my way, I made sense was always be positive in the face of negativity, and never get mad personally, because it's sort of almost beyond our control. And I sort of didn't take it personally after a while, and it helped.
Yeah.
Can we go back a little bit? I know you don't want to talk necessarily about your story, but when you were 24, you sought out, you started this journey. So what happened from there?
I guess I would just call it life. I mean, you can't just like, I spent
but did you finally found, I mean, had to do this all yourself.
Yeah, I found my biological mom in Michigan in 1989. And then a month later, I found my biological father who was living in San Diego.
What was their story together?
I described that. He's a dentist, and they met, and probably however it is, it's going to remain a hidden mystery to me. It was, 2 people who were young, who slept together without contraception, resulting in a pregnancy that was unwanted, and in which he denied and claimed. And so I've heard multiple family stories about that, but he was already married before I was born to another woman, and his marriage resulted in 2 children who are 2 of my half sisters. And I met one of my half sisters in person in 2014, which got me going on my book. So I met him, and I never talked to him again. I went to his door, and he just said, "I'm not your father, get off my property." And that ended that story. But I still went ahead and met his kin in 2007 in his birth state in the Midwest. And I met his sister and my cousin, biological cousin, and they greeted me, and they knew who I was looking at me. I mean, I got pictures of me next to them, and we look alike. I mean, there's no doubt that we're biologically related. My aunts look so much like me in some ways, and we're smiling. And so then I remember in that conversation where I knew there were all these lies that were told about me, and I just stopped them. I said, "Did you believe any of that?" And then the aunt looked at me, and she was at the time, I think she was in her late 70s, and she's passed away. She goes, "No, I didn't believe that." So there's these dark stories that were told about me because I'm the bastard. I was out to destroy him and his family and their family storytelling, and that was a flat out lie.
Did he perpetuate that?
As far as I know, yeah, he perpetuated it for years and years and years. I'm not going to say what he said, but it was pretty outrageous. And it's one of the reasons I completely embraced my bastard identity, because I was the bastard, and I was everything, every stereotype we have about what a bastard is, which is an agent of destruction, a demon seed, an unwanted, harmful elements in society. I mean, they're just, English storytelling in particular is just filled with the mythos of, the bastard as the one who is the bringer of chaos. And that's how I was. I fulfilled my stereotype. And that's one reason why I embraced my name. I am a bastard. I literally am a bastard in every sense of the word. And in California, I just saw what it means again. The voice doesn't matter. You're ignored. You're a bastard, So anyway, with him, so he was not part of my life at all. I met him once, and I had a chance to physically look at him. He's a little shorter than me. He looked healthy, a little stockier, had dark hair. This is from my Finnish family side. It was slightly redder when I was younger, and that's on my maternal grandmother's side. He had dark hair, and his body, he was mowing his lawn, and I saw all of his hair on his legs. Oh yeah, that's my hair too. And so I sort of maybe have some of his physical attributes. I don't know.
And when you met your mom, how was that? Your biological mom?
It was, she's the best storyteller of that, and she's not been telling that story. So I always respect her privacy on this. So I don't want to be telling her story. I mean, it was remarkably uneventful. It was like having a beer and then looking at someone who looks like you. And my cousin was there sort of as a moral support, and he learned I learned later that he learned that day that I existed. So I came into their lives at the same time, and I'm in touch with my cousin to this day. So we get along pretty well. And he's the son of my mother's twin brother, and I'm older than him by 3 years. So he came sort of as her backup. And after that, it was sort of like once or twice a year visits, and they were always uneventful. My maternal grandparents were very excited, and they were, and my maternal grandmother always said, I always would bite my tongue when I told everyone I had one grandchild, because she would continue to lie throughout her life that I didn't exist. And I've got a family tree.
Who continued to lie? Your biological mom?
My biological grandma. They all lied. I mean, yeah. She never told the story, and neither did my biological grandparents. I was just wiped away. So I've got a family tree, a Finnish family tree. It's like this wide, and I'm working on my Finnish family ancestry project right now. And I've tracked everything, and then there's her part, and then there's her, and then there's no child underneath her, and then I can see my cousin there. But when my grandmother died in 1994, my maternal grandfather, I was listed. So at least in her death, my grandfather acknowledged me. So I came back, but my relatives on my maternal side never knew about me. They were not told about me. And so I've just gotten in touch with because of my birth mother's condition right now, I've gotten in touch with her cousins for the first time ever. And just because time's running out and I want to get to know these people, and we're chatting like buddies, and, they've sent me all these family pictures, and, they said, well, we didn't know until, you came. So like it was all hidden for a quarter of a century. And then I just arrived. And then it sort of came out, and then no one bothered to reach out to me. So I think it's this sort of taboo topic. What do you do about this person? I don't know. So because I don't know, don't do anything about it.
Yeah, they could be interested, but they were sort of, it's they don't know what to do.
Yeah, there's no rule book.
You're making those inroads, though. You're making those.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So she had no more kids?
Nope, I'm it. I'm it. I'm the one, and I look like her.
And what about
the main difference is I got a massive nose, and that's from no, I love it. It's this. I love this nose.
Louise, that's a fact.
I guess he's a fact teller, but it's not massive. I'll tell you.
No, I embrace my proboscis because my great grandmother on my maternal grandfather's side, she has a picture of her standing on her porch, proper prim looking, late 1800s, I think. And she looks like the Wicked Witch of the West. She's the smack dab replica of Margaret Hamilton, and I love it. And so when I just look at that nose, and you pull that nose out and slip it on my face, and that's what the genes did to me with that side of the family.
Now, on your are you in touch with your siblings on your father's side?
Well, I mean, I've always had my doors open the entire time. It's not been walked through. I mean, when I met my half sister in 2014, I knocked on her door, literally. Yeah, literally knocked on her door. That was how it began. I just decided I'm going to do this. I was switching jobs, moved from Seattle to Portland, and I'm like, okay, she's there. I've got her address. I'm really good at finding people because guess what? I'm an adoptee and I have to be good at finding things. And I flew down there and I just went to her house and I knocked on the door and she let me in. Just like that. And then she said, she started using the words, our Father. And then in subsequent communication, she would say, brother. So it's this weird, thing. And
she embraced it though.
In her own way. And I can't control, it's as I've gotten older, I was like, that is beyond my control. I cannot control this other person's reactions to me. All I can do is be me and show up. I let her know during the pandemic I'd written the book, just because the pandemic made us think a lot about doing things that needed to be done and we were delaying. And never heard from her after I shared it. And I continued to just send like a Christmas note by email. That's because that's what I do. I send email notes and cards to people who don't even like me, just because I like to bring a little bit of good cheer and promote a little bit of fellowship because I think it's a good thing.
I hope we get one, by the
way. What is your life like now? Like relationships?
Well, everything is, I'm in that, I would say I'm in the chapter where everyone is tragically passing away. So it's that chapter of life where my adoptive mother's gone. My biological mother is not doing well with multiple issues, including cognitive impairment and chronic disease. My adoptive sister has been, I've talked about this before, she's in a nursing home and is bedbound and has, I just sort of think, a call could come anytime. So I'm always on a waiting mode, and I've become an advocate for her and for nursing home issues. And, that's sort of my thing, is to support her on these hard things that are happening to her physically. So that's
I'm so glad you do that for her.
It's just,
what do you do for you? Like, how do you help yourself?
Well, I'm going to go for a really long run. I'm going to eat a chocolate chip cookie every morning. I mean, I do certain things that make me really happy, and the smallest pleasures, like a chocolate chip cookie in the morning. Actually, if the day goes wrong, I've had a chocolate chip cookie in the morning.
Is that what you were eating when I got on?
That was just those are my other morning things. Those are my morning ritual of nuts. So, but no, I do small things, and what I'm doing for me right now is my project with trying to go to Finland. I want to meet biological kin who are related to my maternal grandmother. And so her parents were Finnish immigrants who came to northern Michigan in the early 1900s. And I have this really wonderful data of all these ancestors. And now I have to go back in time and sort of go up the tree and then come down the tree the other side to figure out who these people are. And I've sort of embraced my Finnishness.
Good for you.
And it's because I look at those pictures and like, yeah, that's me. I mean, and what was interesting, I learned about Finland too. Why did they leave? Well, I didn't know this. It's nerdy of me, but in Finland in the 1860s, 1 out of every 10 Finns died of a famine. It was 2 years of famine, and it was called the Great Famine, and 200,000 people died. And Finland wasn't even a country then; it was under the Russian Empire. And so I just think that's really fascinating. I come from the story of these people who, like some of those, their lives were impacted by this traumatic event. And that traumatic event is part of my family story of them coming here, which it is for many immigrants, obviously. And it's no different. But I just sort of, I like the winter in a certain sense. I went to Alaska and I was a cross country skier there. And like, why do I like this so much? And now it sort of makes sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, well, you sort of have Arctic DNA in your body. Your family survived that. And so you probably have some adaptive capacity to enjoy it. So that's what I do. That's my project.
I can see it makes you happy too, because you light up talking about it.
It's an interesting story.
It is interesting.
What I like about the Finns is I claimed this actually right after I learned I had Finnish ancestry. Is there's this expression in Finland, it's called sisu, and sisu is an expression that means never, ever, ever, ever give up. And if you were to use one word in Finnish to describe the national character, and that character is the ability to endure and to overcome and to come out strong. And so that is the Finnish national character. They live it, they've embodied it. They live next to a really bad neighbor who conquered them and invaded them, and they succeeded in maintaining their independence in World War II under great circumstances. And I always would like to think that some of that and that character sort of came through me, maybe.
I was going to say that's you.
Yeah, so I sort of, I embraced it because I saw myself in it. So maybe I wanted to find it, but it seemed to make sense to me. So now I'm like, okay, I'm getting old. I should see these people. And I think the fact that if they knew my story, they would think it's sort of interesting too. So we'll see.
Well, keep us updated, I hope, and love to hear that. About that journey.
Me too. I want to hear about what goes on when you go.
Yeah, it's Finland suddenly in the news again, right? I mean,
yes.
They had a woman prime minister who was like really well respected and guided their country during the pandemic greatly.
Yeah.
So they've done some really interesting things, and they take care of their kids. They have a great education system. They have universal health care. And they did this all, without a whole lot of help. So there's something that they do well. And the fact that they really take care of their moms and kids really impresses me. And I kind of want to see that, because we don't do a good job of that.
We sure don't. Yeah.
And that disappoints me. And I feel for that. And so I would sort of like to learn a little bit about that firsthand, because they do some stuff right. They were like the happiest country again. And their maternity outcomes are much better for their mothers and their kids. And we continue to force women, to make these horrible choices about surrendering children to adoption because they don't have any supports. We don't have universal health care. I mean, there's all this policy stuff that is behind this for us that we don't want to talk about nationally, but that's one of the reasons why. I mean, baby boxes are coming back in different
unbelievable. I can't even.
Sick.
And that would never, I mean, that happened in Europe, but in certain countries that just, they would be shocked, I think. So, I mean, Finland's got problems too. I mean, alcoholism and all this other stuff. I'm sure they've got some bad stuff, and I don't want to make them seem like superheroes because they're not.
Well, you're sort of a hero for people. I think there's going to be somebody in Michigan listening who's going to, from this era, who can't get their records and is going to be affected by this podcast.
Well, thanks. And I do find that when people find my stuff online, which I've published, it's very emotional for them. And I think the fact that I've provided information about where many of them were born, or where some of these young women surrendered their children, they feel some sort of like someone has finally told the story that was not told. And so I just sort of allow these comments to keep trickling in, and I accept them on my website, which is How Lucky You Are, and then Lucky You Are.
Yeah, we'll put all that in there. Is that also where people can get your book?
Yeah,
Tell us the title
yeah.
of your book, and
Yep.
and once again say your website so people can.
Oh, it's howluckyyouare.com.
And with a U, not a Y-O-U.
All one
Okay.
word, right?
How lucky. Okay.
You're so lucky.
And that's where your book can be found and purchased. Okay.
And for people, for Michigan folks of my era, they're just finding that these comments by others like them, and just a couple of stories I put, that as I would get more information about the hospital and pictures, there's very few photos published, it became a place for them to sort of like place an anchor. And I always respond to everybody as quickly as I can. And if I can't help them, I tell them why I can't help them. In many cases I can't, because I literally cannot change the laws of Michigan.
Yeah.
I literally can't do that. And so I provided a guide for anyone who wants to try and get an original birth certificate, because the state isn't doing that. And it's a cluster. It's a complete cluster. And I don't wish on anybody. And very few people are able to get their original birth certificates, even if they know their families. It's a mess. The state of Michigan system, I mean, other states are worse, but Michigan's a mess. And there's no one there. I mean, there's some advocates there that are working on it. I mean, I think maybe 2 years time, hopefully, if Governor Whitmer is still around, she'll be around another 3 years. So we have a space where there's hopefully a Democratic legislature majority and the Democrat governor. And then now comes the hard part of trying to change minds and hearts to see if there can be reform. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I can only do so much here in Portland. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good fight.
And tell us the book. Sarah asked you to say your book's name.
Oh yeah, my book is called How Lucky. You don't know.
Yeah, show it if you want to show it.
So there we go.
You don't know how lucky you are. Okay.
And I've got all my notes on it. And the reason I call an adoptee's journey through the American adoption experience, again going back to the journey, Joseph Campbell, is because you don't know how lucky you are, is what my half sister told me when I met her for the first time in 2014. So she said that to me. So it's
a great title.
And it has a double meaning for me.
Yes.
And for her, she wanted us to convey that you don't know my story, and my family had a really hard time, and you were probably lucky you were adopted. I think
I know that's such a narrative out there.
but that's okay. That's okay, because actually it forced me to actually reconsider everything I had been thinking. And I had a moment where I time traveled in my head. I talk about this in the book, where I don't know if you've had these experiences where you actually have awakening, a moment of realization. And for me, this realization was like all this stuff that has been churning and learning in my head, and maybe all these things which I described in detail, my adoptive father's domestic abuse of my mother, his alcoholism, whatever, maybe I need to rethink all of that differently. And I need to sort of come to a new realization that life is filled with what you have to deal with, and you have to address life. You have to embrace it. You can't hide from it. And I really learned that later in life. It took me a long time, and I don't think it was great, but it helped me, and it's helping me be a good advocate for my sister, with my biological family, so they can support my biological mother better. So I'm having to step in this advocacy role in other places, and I'm good at it. And the results aren't going to be great, but they're going to be tangible in some sense. So
it's your calling.
It got some benefits.
You're an advocate. Your calling is an advocate.
It's one. It's one. It's just I find meaning in it, and therefore I do it. So right now I get. For me, it provides a good way to spend my free time right now. That'll maybe change. I don't know. But for now, it's where I'm choosing to be, and for me, it makes sense. And I get it, and I hear other people's story, and I get their story, and I try to elevate their stories too if they need to be elevated, and that's what I do. So,
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on and having this honest, real talk and doing your advocacy work.
learned
I
a
really
lot.
appreciate it. Yeah.
thank you both. It's an honor and a pleasure, and just look forward to seeing more of your work and hearing more of the stories and learning from other folks, and collectively getting wiser from what we're able to do together.
I'm trying to make some
you.
changes. Yes.
Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rudy.
We'll see you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.